Today we have Dr. Mark Douglas. Dr. Douglas is the professor of Christian ethics at Columbia Theological Seminary. He has written many books. He received his Master's of Divinity at Princeton Theological Seminary and also stayed to receive his and study and receive his Master's of Theology. He ended up receiving his PhD from the University of Virginia. He's been associated with Columbia Theological Seminary since 1999 and is currently the professor of Christian ethics and the director of the seminary's Masters of Divinity program. So we welcome Dr. Mark Douglas to talk today about Christian ethics. Let's talk about, for a minute, another much broader issue, and it has so many tentacles to the conversation because it's systemic, it's personal, and everything. But what I'm calling the I can't breathe protest. I guess the question is, we see this on TV. There's a systemic issue. It obviously affects the way we vote, but it also just affects us getting up and living in our skin, in our place in society. And when I first went to my first large church in 1982, it was about 4 miles from where most of the civil rights demonstrations had been in Birmingham in the 60s. So one of the things I did early on, I looked at old sermons that came from that pulpit, a fairly progressive church. And it was interesting to me that the sermons talked about those events happening a few miles away as if they were on the other planet. They weren't us. Mm-hmm. And I guess I worry, trying to be a conscientious, good Christian and a person of faith. I think it's too easy to see that as not us, it's somebody else. And how does the normal Christian engage in a constructive manner with the issues at hand that are being brought up by these I can't breathe protests?
Mm-hmm. What a deep and complicated question, and I will tell you that I can only give especially inadequate answers to it. I think all my answers are inadequate. I do not bear the mind of God yet. I look forward to that point when I might, but that has not yet happened. In this instance, let's recognize first a perfect storm of events that are shaping this, right? So I Can't Breathe doesn't start with George Floyd. It was what Eric Gardner said on the sidewalk of New York when his life was taken from him by New York cops. It matched with what Michael Brown experienced in Ferguson or what Sandra Bland experienced in Dallas. This is a long pattern of the abuse of persons of color by police departments. Now, what I want to really clear on, not all police do this. This is not necessarily a kind of police are all bad statement that I'm making. What I am saying, though, is that there is a history that we just cannot ignore in which minoritized persons have been treated differently by within the context of law and order than have other persons. So there is that storm, and that has been brewing a long time. When you talk to African Americans, they do not say they are shocked at what happened. They say they are horrified by what happened, but it seems pretty damn familiar. Mm-hmm. And to hear that is to be reminded that what they experience on a day-to-day basis and their perception of the world as a result of what people who look like them experience is truly meaningful. One just kind of anecdote in the middle of that, Paul Roberts is a good friend and colleague and the president of Johnson C. Smith Seminary, an African-American man who never used to stand watch while his son went for a run. But at this point in our nation's history, Paul says, now when he goes out for a run, I wait. I sit and wait for him to make sure he's coming back.
Wow.
Um, that's something that needs to be paid attention. So there is that storm that has been building for a very long time. There is the storm of just um, the lack of attention to building political and social structures capable of helping fund a body politics and a body economics and a body social that is resilient for the possibility that that big things like the pandemic may occur. Right? We have been dismantling
Mhm.
social structures in the interest of favoring individual freedoms. And what we are seeing in part is that if you dismantle far enough, you not only lose the structures that are necessary, but you'll effectively you'll lose your freedoms as well. So that also has been going on for a very long time, a generation or two at least. So there's that storm. There is simply the storm of the pandemic and people being put into situations as of March where they were limited in what they were told they ought to be doing and who to be contacting with. And they just are desperate not to feel so constrained anymore. And then at the end of it, there is the storm of a body politics in which our two parties are not functional vis-a-vis each other, and in their dysfunctions have grown further apart. And in growing further apart, they have been catering to the worst elements within them. And I will give away my own political inclinations to say that not the two parties were not equal in change, and that modern conservatism, contemporary conservatism, does not look to me like modern conservatism of the past 60 years. That it has changed dramatically and changed for the worst, and people are just fed up with what they're seeing, with levels of corruption, with levels of falsehood coming from the top, with levels of lack of preparation, with levels of loss of international significance. I mean, they're just already carrying anger about this, or they're angry because other people are angry at them.
Mhm.
There's just so much anger that boils up, and so you get this storm of events in the middle of it, all of which are backgrounded by far larger. You can't call these things storms. We'll call them changes in social climate. The advent of technology and the way it is changing how we interact with each other, the shift in economics to a more finance-based form of neoliberal capitalism that doesn't look like the manufacturing capitalism that sustained growth in the US for the better part of the last century. Um, the huge loss of biodiversity in the world, that we're extinguishing each day what used to take a year.
Mhm.
We are losing biodiversity at that rate. That we are looking at climatic change that is unequaled in human history. Right? There are so many changes that are going on that are they're leaving us vertiginous. They're leaving us unsettled. They're leaving us not sure where our solid footing is. And so when you add the storms to that, getting cast to and fro and joining tides is part of what we're going to see.
Well, in the midst of all this, what is your greatest hope? How would you, if God were to ask you and say, Dr. Douglas, you study this, what would you want to do? What would be an aspiration that we could reasonably look for in 5 or 10 years, without being political? But
Mhm.
how would we look? How would
Well,
we?
again, I'll go back to it is my conviction God has never left us bereft of God's self. And I look out in the world and see God doing things right now, right? Um, I have marveled at the resilience of the church to adjust to a COVID era.
Hmm.
Um, the fact that we're doing this now is its own wonder worth interpreting, right? I've been here for, 20 some years. That church has been there, not too far away, a couple states away, but not too far away,
Mhm.
much longer than that. Um, Now this technology makes it possible for us to have this conversation and for me to be engaged with you all in a way that it just didn't occur to us to do so before, when you all thought like, we got to put him in a car,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think there's those types of things. the thing that gives me the greatest hope time and again is that I get to watch what my wife does. My wife, the Reverend Dr. Lindsay Armstrong, is the executive director for New Church Developments for the Presbyterian Church in this area. She directly oversees 26 different worshiping communities that are on their way to becoming Presbyterian churches. They are energetic, they are diverse, they are imaginative, they are doing things that are making huge differences in their communities, and they're doing so not kind of by pursuing established methods or making sure that the people that are doing them have been in the church for 50 years. They're doing them with people who are new to the faith. They're doing it in new ways, in new situations, in new settings, with imaginative ideas about how to be church along the way. And it is her privilege and responsibility to guide them in those processes. And every day, she comes and tells me stories about what these churches are doing that just reveal how much spirit blowing there is going on right now. When you see those types of things happening, there is good reason for us to be hopeful. They are evidence time and again that God simply does not leave us alone and refuses to leave us to our own devices, but instead is working gracefully, working fruitfully to bring about transformations that produce greater equality, that produce greater justice, that produce greater peace, that produce greater righteousness. Those are things that mostly it's a matter of paying attention to where the narratives are, because the narratives are out there. Probably that also means turn off the cable news every once in a while. That's not where you get the narratives.
And one principle I work off of is there's nothing new under the sun. And it appears new. But in the days of Socrates, I mean, from then on, there's always systems that get corrupted. There's always unfaithful people, but there's always been a call for faithfulness where people rise above the darkness and shine the light and live by the light. And that sort of kind of keeps me going. And
well, especially that's a good kind of Ecclesiastes type of way to go. But the other thing to say is that it is during those periods often that you get kind of the most dramatic potential for new types of growth in the church and society, right? That crises like these have been responded to not only with ways that have led to the ends of empires and declines of societies, but to the creation of new ways of being that are more fruitful and that are more that produce greater benefits for a greater range of people than ever before.
Yeah, that's inspiring to me. And frankly, the vision that we can be impactful, possibly even in small ways, is motivating for me. We recently, as a church, decided to offload a lot of our unused square footage to a nonprofit as a nonprofit center. And there was universal acceptance of this, but there was one or two people who said, no, I don't think that'll work. And one lady I talked to later, she said, Richard, I just don't think it will work. And I said, you're probably right. But I said, it's okay to fail as long as we're trying to do something that is good. We're trying to be good stewards of a big building that we pay for and it's not being used. Why not try? But it was really interesting that the reason was it won't work. And if what we do doesn't work, I don't worry about as much of that as not doing something.
Right.
And I think as people of faith, and I see it all the time too, people of faith seeing what's going on and they see a responsibility and to either give more or to be involved or to march or whatever, and to help make a better world for themselves and for the rest of the people. Yeah. I can only fathom what it would be like to be on the cutting edge of ethics like you are, writing books, influencing people, transforming people, and then they go out and help transform others. I think that's got to be, Mark, the most exciting thing that anybody could do for a living.
I used to think I had the best job in the PCUSA until my wife got her job. So I think I have the second best job in the denomination.
Well, but y'all together, and I still remember being in one of your cars, and you said it's the gas guzzler, but it was the hybrid car.
It was a Prius, yeah. It was the one that gets 50 miles to the gallon because my car's an electric car.
I hope we do this again because I think we're trying to use technology to get what you say and what you think in the hands and minds of people here in Decatur and around Alabama. So thank you for joining me. We'll have another discussion again. And Dr. Mark Douglas, thank you for being who you are, for influencing the world to the better, and helping our little church see some new directions and new insight. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and God bless you and the ministries that you all are undertaking there.
Thank you.